Welcome to the second episode of our series ahead of the general election, bringing you exclusive interviews with candidates from across the political spectrum. I'm Kazim, and I'm a researcher here at the Community Policy Forum, an independent think tank seeking to promote evidence-based and community-centered approaches to policymaking surrounding the structural inequalities facing Muslim communities in the UK. Our goal with this series is to provide an in-depth analysis and diverse perspectives on the key issues shaping this election, especially those pertaining to British Muslim communities. We'll hear directly from candidates about their, and where applicable, their party's policies, visions for the future, and how they plan to address the concerns of voters like you. Whether you're still undecided or just want to learn more about where each candidate and each party stands, this series intends to offer valuable information to help you make an informed decision on election day. In this episode, we're pleased to be joined by Sir Stephen Timms. Sir Stephen, a former leader of Newham Council, was first elected to Parliament in June 1994 and has represented East Ham continuously since then. He served as a minister for 12 years under Tony Blair and Gordon Brown, including as Minister for Schools, Minister for Pensions, and Minister for Employment, and serving for a year in the Cabinet as Chief Secretary to the Treasury in 2006 to 2007. From 2020 until the recent dissolution of Parliament, he was chair of the Work and Pensions Select Committee. He is a former chair of Christians on the Left, was the founder in 2004 of the organisation Muslim Friends of Labour, and has been the Labour Party's faith envoy since 2007. He has been the leading campaigner in the House introduction of alternative student finance for Muslim students unwilling to pay interest on student loans. Thank you so much, Stephen, for taking time out of your busy campaigning schedule to join us today.
Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you. So, Stephen, I just wanted to kick off by asking you a question around Gaza. And I mean, the question of Gaza and Palestine has no doubt become arguably the most significant issue for a large majority of Muslims in this election. So what is your stance on this matter?
Well, it's certainly a huge issue amongst my constituents in the course of this election. And, I've spoken to a fair number of constituents telling me there've been times they haven't been able to sleep because of the horror of these appalling images appearing on screens and phones the whole time, and every day some new horror unfolds. So it's a huge issue. Worth making the point as well, I think, that those who are deeply concerned about what's happening in Gaza are equally concerned about what's happening in the health service and safety on our streets and making sure we don't have another cost of living crisis and so on. So these are all issues, I think, in people's minds at the moment. But on Gaza, I voted for an immediate ceasefire when we first had the opportunity to do that, which was in November last year. About 50 of us, I think, just over 50 of us Labour MPs did that. I was one. And it remains my view that this should come to an end and should come to an end today. And I'm pleased that that is now the official policy of the Labour Party. And I think Britain should be doing everything it can to stop this appalling carnage that's been underway for all these months. I'm pleased that to some extent the international community is, the US has had a go, not very successfully, but they've had a go. The need to end this, I think, is now very, very clear. And it's certainly what I've been pressing for consistently ever since November. I've also pointed out that in British law, if British-made arms are being used in ways which may be in breach of international law, then those arms should not be sold. And I think there are grave concerns about the way British-made arms are being used in the current conflict. I've called on the government repeatedly to restore UK funding to UNRWA, pressed for much greater access to relief. And we've all seen in the last few days terrible images of children in Gaza suffering in the most appalling ways through lack of enough to eat. Um, so at the moment, there isn't much sign of light at the end of the tunnel, but I very much want a new government to increase UK efforts to end the conflict. And one thing I've been very encouraged by in the Labour Party manifesto is the very, very clear assertion, I haven't seen this before, but a very clear assertion in the Labour Party manifesto that a Palestinian state is the inalienable right of the Palestinian people. I think that's quite a strong statement to make and a very good starting point for an incoming government looking at how to approach this, that we must deliver a Palestinian state. The commitment has long been to a two-state solution. There hasn't been the energy behind that. That does now need to be the focus of real effort on the part of the UK and internationally to deliver a two-state solution, to deliver a Palestinian state, to recognise the state of Palestine, which Parliament agreed to do about 10 years ago, but the government has never been willing to do it. I want a Labour government to get on and do that.
Thank you, Stephen. I mean, you just alluded to kind of, besides Gaza, a range of issues that are important to Muslim voters and to voters in general. And one of the areas that you've done extensive work around these past few years is the introduction of an alternative student finance project, as I mentioned earlier on. What progress has been made on that front?
Well, I'm pleased there has been some progress. So you'll remember that David Cameron, in I think 2013, committed the government to introducing a student loan system that did not involve the payment of interest. And so a system that was accessible to Muslim students who are unwilling to pay interest. But nothing happened. There was some work done after he made that commitment, but once he'd gone, David Cameron, nothing really happened for years. So during the pandemic, I led on an adjournment debate pressing the then universities minister to get a move on with this. She was very non-committal about it at the time, but the momentum has built up behind that campaign, and I am now pleased that we do have a proper project underway with planned deliverables and some indications of the timescale for delivering them, which will provide alternative student finance as part of the government's lifelong learning entitlement reforms. And I think the idea is that that should be ready for students starting their courses in September 2026. So that will have taken 13 years after David Cameron promised it. But there is now serious work underway. I'm convinced that is the case. And I look forward to the new government committing to delivering on or completing the work that is now underway and perhaps telling us a bit more about the full timetable for it all.
Thank you, Stephen, and thank you for sort of your work in that area. I mean, it's like you said, it's been many years coming, but hopefully we do have that ASF product in place sooner rather than later.
It's estimated that perhaps 4,000 Muslim young people every year choose not to go into higher education because they cannot get funding which is compatible with their faith. And it's a terrible lost opportunity for them, but a terrible lost opportunity for the country as well. We need people being able to fulfill their potential.
Indeed, and I mean that's one of the topics that we discuss extensively in our most recent report ahead of the election, where we have a policy pledge on education. And one of the most important things that we emphasize in that is the need for the government to fulfill this pledge of adopting an alternative student finance product. Would you mind speaking a little bit more to wider plans that the Labour Party have were they elected to government to engage faith communities, but specifically with Muslim communities?
Yes, well, I'm very pleased about the fact that in the course of the current election campaign, the Labour Party has designated one of the weeks as the Faith Communities Week. And Keir Starmer issued a letter, which I've got a copy of in front of me, which I really welcomed, which he makes the point that as he travels around the country, he's reminded regularly of the many ways that faith contributes to the rich diversity of the UK. And, I think what struck many people, including a very large number in my party, was that come the pandemic and the lockdowns, communities in every part of the country turned to their faith groups to get people through that very, very hard time, providing the most basic essentials of life. Food, for example, in my community in East London, it was the mosques and the churches which delivered during that time. And I think the lesson to be drawn from that is, if you're looking for resources to change things for the better in our communities in Britain in the 2020s, then the faith communities are the best place to look. And I want to see, and I'm encouraged by Keir Starmer's letter, that he's acknowledging the importance of an incoming government engaging much more proactively with faith groups than has been the case for the last 14 years. And indeed, Keir speaks in his letter about appointing a government minister to lead on engagement with faith communities. That's, I think, the kind of initiative that we need, and which I very much want to see Muslim communities being able to benefit from.
Thank you, Stephen. So I just wanted to kind of end this discussion by circling the conversation back to the issue of Palestine. And Labour's stance on Palestine has led to a significant loss of support within Muslim communities. I mean, there's been various data, for example, from Muslim census that's demonstrated that. And how does the party coming out of this election intend to rebuild that trust with Muslim communities?
Well, I do think the Labour Party manifesto, and I've quoted some points in it, is very helpful in doing that, in firmly committing to support for an immediate ceasefire and making this quite strong assertion that a Palestinian state is the inalienable right of the Palestinian people. I think that's a good starting point. But of course, it's going to depend what the government actually does in practice. I don't think putting those points in the manifesto, important though they are, is in itself going to rebuild the confidence that's needed. But I very much hope that once, if Labour is elected to government, then people will be encouraged by the approach the new government takes, and that we will be able to rebuild the trust that has, in some quarters, undoubtedly been badly damaged.
Thank you, Stephen. On that note, we wanted to end today's discussion. Thanking you once again for taking time out to join us to talk to me today. It's been brilliant, and I hope that coming out of this election, a way to be re-elected, that there is further opportunity for us to engage moving forward. Thank you very much.
Thank you for inviting me, and I'll be delighted to engage with you in the future as well.
Brilliant. Thank you.
Thank you.